Sleeping Beauty was never for children. The horror of Sun, Moon and Talia. Warning, this is not a children's tale. Before Charles Perrault polished the story into a refined salon fable, before the brothers Grimm dressed it up with roses and happy endings, there was Giambattista Basile, a 17th century Italian collector of folktales. In his Pentamerone, he preserved one of the darkest, most disturbing origins of the story we know as Sleeping Beauty. It was not called Sleeping Beauty then. Its name was Sun, Moon and Talia, and it was never meant for children. A fatal prophecy. Long ago there lived a wealthy lord who had a single beloved daughter, a radiant child named Talia. At her birth, astrologers and fortune-tellers were summoned to predict her fate. They all agreed her life would be threatened by something small, fragile and deadly, a splinter of flax, a piece of linen thread. Terrified, the Lord ordered every trace of linen removed from his household. No flax, no spinning, no weaving was ever to enter his castle again. For 14 years, Talia grew, blossoming into a graceful young girl, admired by all. But fate cannot be locked away. One day, as she sat gazing from a window, she noticed an older woman spinning flax by the roadside. Curious, having never seen a spindle before, Talia ran to her and begged to be taught. The older woman agreed, but the moment Talia touched the spindle, a sliver of flax lodged itself beneath her fingernail. She collapsed lifeless to the ground. Her father, shattered with grief, could not bury her. Instead, he placed her body upon a throne in a secluded palace, locked the doors, and left her to eternal sleep. The intrusion of the king. Years passed. One day, a young king hunting nearby discovered the mysterious palace. Intrigued, he forced his way inside. Room by room, he wandered until he found the throne. There sat Talia, motionless, pale, but still impossibly beautiful. And the king was overcome, not with reverence, not with pity, but with desire. Without a word, without consent, without even knowing if she was alive or dead, he carried her to a bed. And there he plucked the fruit, a grotesque euphemism for rape. Satisfied, he left her body where he had found it and returned to his castle as if nothing had happened. Birth in sleep. 9 months later, while Talia still lay unconscious, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. 2 fairies appeared and placed the infants at their mother's breast, but they could not find sustenance, and instead their tiny mouths suckled her fingers. In their desperate search for milk, they sucked the sliver of flax from beneath her nail. And in that moment, Talia awoke. She opened her eyes to find herself in an unfamiliar room, 2 newborns in her arms, with no memory of what had transpired. The return of the king. Sometime later, the king remembered the girl whose sweet fruit he had stolen. Desire gnawed at him again. He rode back to the silent palace, perhaps expecting the same frozen doll he had once taken. Instead, to his shock, he found a young woman alive, awake now, with 2 infants in her arms. She named them Sun and Moon. The king instantly understood the truth. They were his children. Without shame, without apology, he announced this revelation as if it were a joyous destiny. Talia, in her innocence and confusion, accepted him warmly. She saw not a predator, but the father of her children, and the king, charming and persuasive, lingered with her for several days, enjoying her company as if nothing monstrous had ever occurred. Analysis. This moment captures the grotesque power imbalance in old folklore. The king violates a sleeping girl, abandons her, then returns only when she produces heirs. Instead of punishment, he is welcomed. The tale romanticizes domination and strips the victim of agency, portraying her gratitude rather than her trauma. The jealous queen. But back in the royal castle, the king's obsession betrayed him. At night, he murmured 3 names in his sleep: Talia, sun, moon. His wife, the queen, heard them and understood. Suspicion hardened into fury. She demanded answers from the captain of the guard, threatening him with death unless he revealed the king's secret. Terrified, he confessed everything: the hidden girl, the twins, the visits. The queen devised her revenge. She sent the guard to Talia's palace, demanding that the infants be delivered to her under the pretense of the king's wish. Naive and trusting, Talia surrendered her babies. The banquet of horror. When the guard placed the children before the queen, she carried them to the royal kitchens. There, she ordered the cook to slaughter them, prepare their flesh, and serve them to the king as a grand feast. But the cook, moved by pity, saved the infants. Instead, he killed 2 lambs and prepared elaborate dishes from their meat. That evening, the king dined merrily, praising the flavors of the feast. All the while, the queen smiled coldly, savoring the thought that her husband was eating his own children. Analysis. Here we see a disturbing double standard of villainy. The queen, driven by jealousy, is painted as monstrous, even though she is reacting to betrayal and humiliation. Meanwhile, the king, who has committed rape and deceit, remains untouched, even celebrated. The tale punishes the woman for her anger, but excuses the man for his violence. The trial by fire. The queen's hunger for vengeance was not yet satisfied. She demanded that Talia herself be brought to the palace, again under the pretense of the king's summons. Talia, trusting and hopeful, came willingly, but instead of a reunion, she was met with horror. The queen had prepared a pyre. The innocent girl was to be burned alive. At the last moment, the royal cook intervened. Gathering his courage, he revealed the truth. The children were alive, hidden safely, and the queen's orders had been treachery against both them and the king. The king, outraged not by his own crimes, but by his wife's betrayal, sentenced the queen to the very fire she had prepared. She was burned at the stake, consumed by flames. And so the king, rapist, liar, adulterer, stood vindicated. He embraced Talia, reunited with sun and moon, and the tale closed with what Basile called a happy ending. A twisted moral. On the surface, the story rewards the king with a family and punishes the evil queen. But if we peel away the varnish, the moral is grotesque. The man who committed sexual violence is celebrated as a father and hero. The naive victim is given to him as a wife. The only character who resisted, the queen, is cast as a monster and executed. Analysis. This is not a fairy tale of justice. It is a tale of patriarchal power, where female voices are silenced, one reduced to passive innocence, the other demonized for her rage. Psychological profiles. The king, classic narcissist. He takes what he desires without remorse, rewrites the narrative so he appears righteous, and the world accepts his version. Talia, a victim showing symptoms akin to Stockholm Syndrome. She embraces her violator because society frames him as her savior. The queen, a woman who dares to fight back against betrayal, but is painted as the ultimate villain. Her crime is not infidelity or violence, it is refusing to be silent. If this happened today. Imagine this story in a modern courtroom. The king would face charges of rape, child endangerment, and coercion. Talia would be recognized as a survivor, not a grateful bride. The queen, instead of being demonized, might be seen as a woman trapped in a toxic marriage, lashing out in desperation. But in the 17th century, the logic of the tale was inverted, male violence excused, female emotion punished. This is why Sun, Moon and Talia feels less like a fairy tale and more like a mirror to the brutal inequalities of its age. From horror to happily ever after. When Giambattista Basile recorded Sun, Moon and Talia in the early 1600s, he was not writing bedtime stories. He was preserving folklore, raw, violent and unfiltered. Later, Charles Perrault reshaped it into Sleeping Beauty, 1697. He stripped away the rape, the cannibalistic banquet, the jealous queen, and replaced them with elegance, a princess cursed by a spindle, 100 years of sleep, and a prince whose kiss awakens her. The Brothers Grimm followed in the 19th century, polishing it further into the familiar fairy tale with roses, spells, and a neat morale. The horror was erased. The story became safe for children. But by smoothing away the darkness, they also erased the brutal truths. The symbolism of flax and sleep. The splinter of flax, a small, ordinary object that seals Talia's fate. It can be read as a symbol of fate itself, how a woman's life was bound by tiny, arbitrary restrictions imposed by society. The endless sleep, more than a magical slumber, it reflects the social death of women, silenced, inert, awaiting the actions of men. The awakening. In Basile's tale, it is grotesque, not by love, but by violation, by the sucking of pain from her body. The act that revives her is not romance, but trauma. A tale of control. At its core, Sun, Moon and Talia is about control over women's bodies and fates. A father who tries to command destiny. A king who takes what he wants. A queen whose rage is punished. A girl who is never allowed to choose. What society once presented as a moral lesson is, in truth, a reflection of systemic power. Women were treated as property, pawns in men's desires and political games. Why it matters now? In a world where discussions of consent, power and gender inequality are louder than ever, revisiting the dark roots of Sleeping Beauty forces us to confront how far we've come and how far we still must go. Where Basile's king was rewarded, today he would face trial. Where Talia's silence was praised, today we recognize the right to speak, resist and demand justice. Where the queen was burned, today we can see her not as a caricature of evil, but as a tragic figure consumed by a toxic system. Sleeping Beauty may now look like a dream of love and rescue, but hidden beneath the roses lies Sun, Moon and Talia, a nightmare of power, silence and survival. The fairy tale we tell children is a lie designed to comfort. The fairy tale we hide from them is the truth that still haunts us, that beauty can be broken, that innocence is not protection, and that sometimes the real monsters wear crowns.